Chapter 2711. 3 years were more than enough. At the very least, Giselle would not have to participate in any blind dates anymore. In the meantime, if either of them came across a better partner or if they had fallen in love with someone else, they could just forfeit the agreement. Long story short, they were just staying together to use each other as a shield. Dad, Mom, you're just overthinking. Even though we can try to date each other, we need some time. What if it doesn't work out after we get married? Am I going to get a divorce? Gordon and Estelle felt that she was right, so they did not force her anymore. Giselle rose to her feet and said, "All right, you don't have to worry about us." After that, Giselle walked upstairs. Estelle and Gordon looked at each other and sighed. James came to the common room to look for Donnie. Mr. Winslow. Seeing that he had something to say, Donnie raised his head. "Yeah, can I finish all of my shooting scenes for tomorrow today?" he asked. Donnie asked, "Do you have something else to do tomorrow?" "Well, you can put it that way, but if you disagree, you can forget everything I said," James replied, smiling awkwardly. "I knew it. I shouldn't have come and asked for leave. He just started the shooting not long ago, and now he was already asking for a leave." What if Donnie thought he was being cocky? Donnie knew that James wouldn't come to look for him and ask something like this if he wasn't out of options. He put the script down and said, "You have a night scene tomorrow. You will have my approval if you can make it here by 11 p.m. tomorrow. That's my only request." James was momentarily stunned, and then a smile broke across his face. "Thank you so much, Mr. Winslow. Don't worry, I'll make it back before that." Donnie waved his hand and said, "All right, you can leave now." When James came out of the common room, he ran into Freya and froze. "You," with a smile on her face, Freya said, "You've done a great job today." James replied in embarrassment, "You've seen it. Of course. You're a very good actor right now. I hope you can keep it that way." James's eyes glowed when he heard Freya's encouragement. He chuckled and said, "Sure. I promise I won't let you down." After he finished speaking, he left. Colton came over with Charm and looked in the direction James disappeared into. "What have you said to him?" Freya poked Charm's cheek and replied, "Nothing. I just gave him some encouragement." "You aren't jealous, are you?" "Charm, your mother is so annoying," Colton said, his face full of pride. Although he was complaining to his daughter, there was no anger in his voice. Freya chuckled. "Your daughter doesn't know what you're talking about." The next day, at Houston City, Giselle came to the airport to pick James up early in the morning. After James got into the car, she asked, "I thought you were shooting a movie now." "I have half a day only. I need to get back at 6, James answered as he closed his eyes to get some rest. He had not slept at all last night. "The earlier we meet, the earlier we can get it done." Giselle wanted to say something but swallowed her words in the end. When they were back at Giselle's house, Gordon and Estelle were surprised to see James. "I thought Giselle told us you were shooting a movie now." James smiled at them and said, "I took a half-day leave from the director, and I need to get back at 6. Gordon replied, "I see. I didn't expect you to take a half-day leave to come over here. I'm really sorry for causing you so much trouble." "It's fine. But I didn't bring any gifts with me since I was too busy. I'll get someone to deliver them to you when I get back." Chapter 2712. Estelle smiled and said, "We're very happy you are here. You don't have to bring us any gifts." Gordon and Estelle brought him to the living room. It was not easy for James to take a leave from his shooting and come here, so they asked their maids to prepare a scrumptious meal for him. Estelle asked him all sorts of questions, including what kind of movie he was shooting, and he answered all of them readily. She was happy with his honesty and down-to-earth attitude. Being an actor must be very tiring, right? James crossed his fingers together and replied with a smile, "Yeah, it is. But there is no such thing as an easy job in this world. It's okay. All of us understand how hard and tiring it is to be an actor. But I hope you'll take care of your health no matter how busy you are," Estelle said gently. James did not know why but felt somewhat guilty when both of them treated him so well. After all, they were not a real couple. Suddenly, Giselle coiled her arm around his and smiled. Mom, I'm sure he must be starving since he has just gotten off the plane. Why don't you go check the food in the kitchen? James froze and sat up straight. Although he had done a lot of intimate scenes with other actresses, he was not shooting any movie right now. Estelle grinned and rose to her feet. All right. After Estelle entered the kitchen, Giselle let go of him. I'm sorry. My mother is very friendly with her guests, so you can let me know if you feel uncomfortable. James was stunned and turned his head to look at her, his eyes filled with surprise. You're worried that I'll feel uncomfortable. Giselle rarely had any expression on her face, no matter what kind of situation she was in. All he had to do was play along with her, and he agreed to cooperate with her because he needed to fool his father as well. In any case, he would not suffer any losses from this cooperation. Therefore, he thought his ears or his mind were playing a trick on him when Giselle told him to inform her if he felt uncomfortable. Giselle looked at him and said, I'm not someone who's incapable of having normal human feelings. Since this is a cooperation, I naturally have to take into account your feelings. James chuckled. Really? Then explain to me why you hung up my call before I even finished my sentence. Giselle was rendered speechless. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned on the couch. But I'm not narrow-minded, so I'll forgive you. However, remember to wait for me to hang up the phone next time. It had always been him who hung up on others. Even if this was a cooperation, it had to be him who was given priority. Giselle fell silent for a moment before nodding. Okay. Meanwhile, at Taylorton, Daisy's babies had grown a lot compared to when they were born. They even started to grab something, and Daisy found it incredible. How can they grow so fast? A nanny standing beside her chuckled. Well, kids grow really fast. I think they'll start to crawl in a few months. When Daisy saw Tak putting his own feet into his mouth, she hastily stopped him. Why are you eating your own feet? Are you hungry? Suddenly, Tak started to cry. After he cried, To began to cry as well. Daisy panicked. Oh my, stop crying. The nanny said, Ma'am, what about you give him a pacifier? After Daisy popped the pacifier into Tak's mouth, he stopped crying. When he stopped crying, To stopped crying as well. She leaned on the bed and sighed. Taking care of a baby is so tiring. The nanny grabbed To's hand lightly and said, It truly isn't an easy task to take care of a baby, but you're very lucky, ma'am. At least your husband will give you a hand. Chapter 2713. After all, most men think that it's women's responsibility to take care of their children and that women should be grateful that they're willing to help them from time to time. Some of the men don't even want to take care of their children. Your husband understands that you suffered a lot during the labor process, so I believe he'll be a good father, said the nanny. Daisy was stunned. Honestly, she felt the nanny was right. She was indeed lucky. After all, most of the time, it was Nolly's who took care of their children. When their kids were crying in the middle of the night, he was the one who went to prepare the milk and comfort them. She looked at her 3 babies and grinned widely. He really is a good father. In the evening, Nolly's went upstairs to look for Daisy after he came home. When he could not find Daisy in the bedroom, he headed to the baby room to find that she was sleeping together with their babies. Nolly's placed his jacket on the back of the chair and walked up to the bed. It was such an eye-catching scene, and he hoped that it would last forever. When Tak turned around, he accidentally kicked To next to him. To was startled and began to cry. As a result, both Tik and Tak were awakened by To's cries, and they cried too. Nolly's frowned and quickly grabbed To into his arms. He stuck a pacifier into his mouth and said, Stop crying. You're going to wake up your mom. To sucked on the pacifier and slowly calmed down. Daisy rubbed her eyes and raised her head. She smiled when she saw Nolly's holding To by the side of the bed. You're back. Did I wake you up? Nolly's stroked her cheek. Daisy nuzzled his palm and said, I heard your voice just now, but I thought it was a dream. After she finished speaking, she looked at Tik and Tak. Slowly, she rose up to her feet and asked, Why is To crying again? Nolly's glanced at Tak, who would kick and punch from time to time even though he was sleeping. Tak kicked him. She chuckled and looked at Tak. You should stop bullying your little brother. After Nales placed Toe back on the bed gently, he said, these three fellows just won't give us a break. After we return, we should just let my father take care of them. After all, he's got a lot of time. Half a month later, Nales brought Daisy and his children back to Yaramore. When Diana and Rick learned they had returned, they hastily rushed to Blue Valley Manor. Diana was delighted as she looked at her three grandsons in the stroller. Oh gosh, you guys are so adorable. All of you are my sweethearts. Rick chuckled. They look a lot like Nales when he was a kid. What? They're much more adorable than our son, Diana said as she squatted in front of the stroller and looked at the three babies. I think they look more like Daisy. Other than Toe, Tick and Tack looked at Diana with watery eyes. When Diana picked Tick up from the stroller, he grabbed the collar of her cloth and started spitting bubbles. Diana wiped his mouth with a bib and said, look at this chubby little baby. He's quite a spitter. Rick looked at the other two babies in the stroller and asked, who is the older brother, and who is the younger brother? Nales replied, the one Mom is holding is the eldest brother. This one on the left is the second, and this one on the right is the youngest. Rick stroked his head. Although the triplets looked exactly the same, the hair of the youngest one on the right was lighter, and his skin was fairer than his two brothers. Diana held Tick's hand and said, he's so quiet. Yeah, Nales replied. The eldest one is quieter. The second one and the youngest one are the naughty ones. Have you named them? Asked Rick. Nales looked at Daisy and smiled. Daisy said she hasn't figured it out yet. Chapter 2714. Diana put Tick back on the stroller and said, I'm not good at giving names. You should ask your father. He's better than me at this. Nales nodded. Then, Dad, I need you to help us take care of them for a while. Rick was stunned. What? Me? It has been a long time since Daisy and I had the chance to spend time together, Nales said grumpily. It had been a long time since they last had any intimate activity, and it was even more impossible for them to do that now with these three kids around them. Daisy was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole and bury herself in it. She did not know how Nales could bring himself to say something so embarrassing to their parents. Soon, Rick took up the task of taking care of the three kids. As for Daisy and Nales, without the kids around them, Nales stuck with Daisy from morning until night. Both of them enjoyed their days to the fullest, and it seemed like they just couldn't have enough of it. At midnight, Daisy complained to him breathlessly, you've eaten all the baby's food rations. What will they eat? He grabbed her into his arms and chuckled deeply, they can drink powdered milk. Daisy was caught between tears and laughter. How can you be so bad? He kissed her forehead and replied, am I? Well, they deserve it since they're being such bad boys. Daisy found a comfortable spot in his arms and said, do you think Dad and Mom will be able to handle them? After all, when all three of them cried at the same time, it would feel like all hell had broken loose. Nales chuckled and tousled her hair. I'm sure they'll be able to handle them. At Stoslow's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Leah was fluent in 4 languages and had worked as an intern at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when she was in Florinia. Not only that, but she was also a graduate of the Foreign Language Department, so she was accepted on an exceptional basis. She was tasked to be the interpreter for the Secretary General in Florinian language just a few days after she turned up for the job. The good thing was that her colleagues were quite friendly, so everything went smoothly. When she was making herself a cup of coffee in the parlor, she received a message from her father. Benjamin, Leah, how is your work over there? Leah, everything is fine here, Dad. You don't have to worry about me. Benjamin, that's good then. Remember to tell me if you run into something. A smile appeared on Leah's face as she felt a surge of warmth gush through her when she saw her father's message. At the same time, a female interpreter came in and greeted her with a smile. While she was making herself a cup of coffee, she asked, how is the interpretation work over in Florinia? Leah replied, it's nice. I've never been to Florinia before. I heard that it's a romantic country. I'm going to travel there with my fiancé when I have the time. You're engaged? Asked Leah. The female interpreter picked up the cup and sighed, yeah, but but we didn't get married because of work. After all, we must go on a honeymoon and have a baby after getting married. It will take a lot of time, and I'm worried I won't be needed for this job when I get back. Unlike them, they would devote themselves to their families after they got married. Many people realized that they had been replaced when they returned to their jobs after getting married and having children. This was what most career-oriented people were anxious about. After they talked for a while, the female interpreter left after she got a message. Leah stayed in the parlor for a while before going back to her work. When she was on her way back to her seat, someone ran into her, and the coffee splashed on her body. Before she could do anything, a man grabbed her hand and asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" Leah raised her head. It seemed to her that the man in front of her was someone from Foreign Affairs too. She pulled her hand out of the man's grip and offered him a polite smile. "I'm fine." The man glanced at her ID card and said, "Are you new here? I'm sorry. I didn't notice you just now. You've got some coffee on your clothes. How about I take you to buy a new set of clothes? Consider it an apology gift from me." Chapter 2715. Leah was cleaning her clothes, and she was momentarily stunned when she heard what the man said. She raised her head to look at him and smiled. "That's not necessary, thank you." After that, she left. Dennis looked in the direction she had disappeared into as a playful smile appeared on his face. After Leah came to the restroom, she took off her jacket. She tried to wash the coffee stain off her jacket but to no avail. Therefore, she had no other choice but to wait until she got home before she could wash her jacket. However, it seemed to her that the man named Dennis was overly enthusiastic. Were all men in Stoslow as enthusiastic as him? She asked inwardly. In the afternoon, Leah draped her jacket on her arm. A car stopped in front of her when she got out of the building. The driver rolled the window down, and he was none other than Dennis. "I'm really sorry about getting the coffee stain on your jacket this afternoon. I don't mean anything, I just want to buy a new jacket for you as an apology gift." Leah did not know why he was so insistent on buying her a new jacket. She had no other choice but to force herself and say, "I accept your apology, Mr. Clark, but you don't have to buy me anything." "All right then, where are you living? I can drive you back. Just consider this a chance for me to redeem myself." Leah hesitated. They were colleagues, and since he was asking to send her home out of kindness, it would be very rude for her to reject him. Just when she was about to say yes, someone honked behind her, startling her. Morrison poked his head out of the window and said, "Are you out of your mind? How can you simply get in someone else's car?" Leah was rendered speechless. Dennis looked toward Morrison and asked, "Is he your friend? What is he talking about?" Dennis couldn't understand their language at all. Leah forced a smile onto her face and said, "I'm sorry. My friend has come to pick me up." She walked toward Morrison's car, and he drove away after she got into his car. Dennis looked at the car that was disappearing into the horizon and frowned. Inside the car, Leah said helplessly, "He's my colleague. He's just being kind to send me home. You don't have to do that." "He's being kind," Morrison sneered. "You've only been here for a while. Do you know him well enough? How can you let him send you home? Can you please use your head? If you let him send you back, he'll know where you're living. Are you really not worried something might happen to you if he learns that you're staying in a hotel?" Leah was stumped, and she felt Morrison was right. She pressed her lips and said, "He bumped into me today and spilled my coffee over my jacket. He wanted to compensate me, but I said no, so he said he wanted to send me back as an apology." Morrison asked, "Did you reject him clearly?" "Yes." "Did he say he wants to bring you to buy a new jacket?" Leah was stunned. How did you know?" Morrison sneered and replied, "This is usually what men do to trick innocent and inexperienced women. If he spilled your coffee and you rejected his gift, he wouldn't keep on pestering you anymore. He wouldn't offer to give you a ride home at all. I might trust him if he said he wanted to bring you to a meal to ask for your forgiveness, but there's no way a man would spare the effort to offer to give a female colleague that he doesn't know a ride home. It's just impossible." Leah leaned on the back of the chair and fell silent. After a short while, she suddenly asked, "Are you worried about me?" Morrison frowned and looked ahead. I'm not worried about you. I just don't want you to get tricked by other people. Leah smiled but did not say anything. After arriving at the hotel she was staying at, she got out of Morrison's car and said, "Thank you for the ride. I'll go back up first." Leah stepped into the hotel's lobby. When Morrison was about to leave, he saw Dennis' car passing through the rearview mirror. He even slowed down his car but drove away after realizing that Morrison was not leaving. Morrison looked at the number plate and frowned. At night, Leah came out of the bathroom when she received a text message. Just as she was about to check the message, the doorbell rang. Chapter 2716. Leah was stunned. Could it be Morrison? Leah walked to the door and was about to open it when she suddenly heard Morrison's voice. "Who the hell are you?" Immediately after that, a series of commotions came from the other side of the door in the corridor. Leah opened the door instantly and went out, only to see Morrison seemingly trying to grab someone, but the person had fast legs. "Morrison!" yelled Leah. He looked back from the end of the corridor and shouted at her angrily, "You didn't check the text that I sent you again, did you?" Leah, who got yelled at by him, froze in place and then asked with a somewhat dazed expression, "What text message are you talking about?" Morrison took a deep breath and scoffed out of pure wrath. "You can throw away your cell phone if you don't plan to use it. I sent you a text message, asking you not to open the door even when you hear a knock on the door. I think death is just not something that bothers you, huh? If I hadn't been keeping an eye out for such an incident, I'm afraid that this woman still wouldn't know that humans can be quite sinister." Leah remained silent for a while before looking back at him. "Thank you, I know now. You should go back first." "What?" Morrison frowned. "What does she mean by that? Is she really not afraid of dying, or does she really think that the security of this hotel is very reliable? I said you should go back for now and have a good rest. Please don't interfere in my affairs anymore." After saying that, Leah returned to her room. Seeing the door close on him, Morrison stood with his arms akimbo and shouted, "Leah Yunch, you really can't tell chalk from cheese, huh? If I ever look out for you again, I'll deem myself a loser." He patted his coat angrily and left. Leah, who was leaning against the door, heard Morrison's footsteps diminishing, thought of something, and buckled the latch of the door immediately. She then took a newspaper from the newspaper rack, folded it, and inserted it into the door's crack. Later that night, when Leah was asleep, she heard the door being unlocked using a card key, but the trespasser could not push the door in because of the deadbolt. Thus, the person closed the door and left. Leah sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. She went to the living room, turned on the light, and found out that the newspaper she had stuck in the crack of the door had already fallen to the floor. The next day, Leah went to the front desk, asking to go through the surveillance of the corridor. The receptionist working at the front desk gave off an embarrassed look and apologized. "I'm sorry, Miss Yunch, but we don't have the right to pull surveillance footage." "Then the person in charge of your department should have the right to do so already, right? Get me your manager." The receptionist summoned their manager, and the manager stepped out of his office and asked, "Excuse me, Miss, is there anything that we can do for you? Someone tried to open the door to my room with a card key last night. I think you should let me take a look at the surveillance footage and give me an explanation. No matter what, I'm still a guest who's currently staying in this hotel. Hence, I don't think this hotel's management would ignore its guests' personal safety, right?" The manager was stunned. Did that really happen? If it's true, then we'll definitely look into the matter. Leah narrowed her eyes. The front desk should also be the department that's in charge of the spare card keys, right? If that's the case, I want to know if the staff on duty last night have ever used the spare card key of my room. Who else had access to that room card last night? The manager immediately asked the front desk staff who was on duty last night, and the staff claimed that they had indeed used the card key and admitted that they had gone to the wrong room. The manager reprimanded him angrily. "How can you unlock the door to the wrong room? What if our guest were to suffer any loss? Do you think you can really afford to make such a mistake?" The receptionist on duty kept apologizing. The manager then looked at Leah with a grin. "I'm really sorry. The incident was caused by one of our employees' negligence. We can upgrade your room to a free business suite, and to express our apology, we'll also give you 2 coupons and a breakfast coupon for free. What do you think about this compensation? Leah took a glance at the receptionist on duty. He kept his head down and tightly grasped his hands in front of him as if extremely nervous. She then retracted her gaze. There's no need for that. Just check me out for now. Leah walked out of the hotel with her luggage. The manager followed her along the way to send her off and kept explaining, Miss Yunch, I'm really sorry about what happened. It's our negligence this time around, and I'm sorry that it's provided you with an unpleasant stay. How about this? We'll give you a 30% discount the next time you decide to book a stay with us. Chapter 2717. Leah picked her luggage up and into the trunk of her car, then turned around and looked at the manager. Thank you, but I don't think I'll need it. Miss Yunch, did something happen? Upon hearing someone else's voice, Leah turned her head and saw Dennis getting out of a car and walking toward the two of them. The manager nodded slightly. Mr. Clark. Leah narrowed her eyes. Do you know each other? Dennis explained with a smile, I own this hotel, but I didn't expect you to be here. Leah was astonished. Is that so? What happened? Dennis asked the manager for an explanation, and the manager answered truthfully. Dennis frowned. If something like that did happen, that employee is worth firing. But the hotel is currently in a shortage of manpower, and I'm afraid that it'll be difficult for us to recruit newcomers after firing him. The manager could not help but feel that Dennis had gone overboard with his decision. Dennis looked at him with a deep cold gaze. If he's caused such panic to our guest and we're not going to fire him, what can we say to explain our mistake to the other guests? Besides, would an experienced employee make such a mistake? The manager was at a loss for words for a while and nodded. Okay, I'll get it done now. He then turned around and left. Leah looked at his back as he left, wondering what was going on in his mind. Dennis smiled at this time. I'm sorry to have let you go through such an experience. How about this? We'll refund you all the money that you've paid for these few days of accommodation. Just take it as compensation from our party. Leah looked at him and smiled. Nah, it's not an easy task to run a hotel. Since you've already fired the person who made the mistake, it's only natural for me not to press the issue. After saying that, she closed her trunk. I'll take my leave first. I still have to attend a meeting at noon. Dennis smiled and gave off a polite smile. All right. As Leah drove away, Dennis' expression dimmed instantly, and the corners of his lips twitched and curled upward, giving off a trace of coldness. Back at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Leah sat at her desk, thinking about what had happened in the hotel, and could not help but feel that something just did not make sense. It stands to reason that the hotel's surveillance footage can be accessed from the front desk, so why did the staff claim that they had no right to go through the footage? And Mr. Clark is actually the hotel's owner. However, when something like that happens, how is his first reaction not to get to the bottom of the incident but to fire the employee who committed the mistake? Isn't that a little too hasty? She glanced at the female interpreter sitting next to her and asked out of the blue, Do you know Mr. Clark well? The female interpreter was startled for a moment, then turned to look at her. Dennis, that young tycoon. Everyone in our department knows him quite well. Young tycoon. Yeah, I heard that his family is quite rich, as they own a hotel business. I heard that he's able to work here in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs because of his family too. The female interpreter supported her chin, with one hand and chuckled. But Dennis is quite a humorous person, so I think he's on the top of the Prince Charming list of quite many female employees in our department. Are you asking me about him because you've also fallen for him? The corners of Leah's lips twitched, and she shook her head. That's not it, but since you've brought this topic up, I do find it strange sometimes. He's such an excellent man, and he's already 32 years old, and yet he's still not married. He doesn't even have a girlfriend. The female interpreter shook her head. I sometimes wonder if he's gay. Leah did not say anything. An excellent but unmarried man must have his own plans in life. However, thinking of what Morrison said and what happened in the hotel last night, She could not help but feel that she must have missed some crucial piece of information. In the afternoon, Leah called Morrison, but he did not answer. She wondered, is he really mad at me? Just as Leah put her cell phone away and walked past the lounge, she saw a woman with messy hair coming out of the lounge. The woman was in such a hurry that she bumped into Leah, but she immediately straightened her attire and left the scene. Chapter 2718. Leah looked back at the woman and could not help but frown. It was not until Dennis came out of the lounge and ran into her that she returned to her senses. A trace of panic flashed across his eyes. Why are you here? I was just walking by. Are you too? Dennis laughed out loud all of a sudden. Oh, she's my girlfriend, and we just had a fight because she cheated on me. I lost my head just now, so we had a slight dispute. Please, don't misunderstand. Leah was momentarily stunned and forced a smile. This is your business with her, so you don't have to worry about me misunderstanding you. I have something else to attend to, so see you around. Have you found a place to live? Dennis's voice came from behind. Leah stopped and looked back at him. How do you know that I'm searching for a place to live? Because you've been staying in a hotel all this time, so I guess that you haven't found a place to live. Dennis approached her. I do own an apartment that's currently vacant, so why don't you live in it? I'll only charge you half of the usual rent. Leah stayed quiet for a while before shaking her head. No, thank you, I'll be able to find a place. She then turned around and left after saying that. Dennis's cheeks bulged, and his expression gradually dimmed as he watched her leave. On the other side of the city, Damon walked into the gym and saw Morrison doing pull-ups and sweating from head to toe. He unscrewed the water bottle in his hand with a grin. Why are you so hard-working today? Morrison gnashed his teeth. I'm in a bad mood. After doing 100 reps, he sat directly on the floor, and his wet vest was stuck to his back and pectoral muscles. Damon threw a towel at him. I heard you've recently maintained a very close relationship with a woman. What's up? Have you fallen in love? He wiped his sweat. Don't mention her in front of me. Hearing her name fires me up. And you're saying that I'm in a relationship with her. I've never seen such a stupid woman. What's wrong? Morrison got up, walked to the side, and sat down. He then picked up the mineral water bottle, drank it, and told Damon what happened. Damon froze for a bit when he heard the story but soon burst into laughter. Have you taken a fancy to her? You got this jealous only because you saw her being too close to another man. I'm jealous my ass. You don't even know who that man is. That man is Dennis Clark. Damon's brows creased. Dennis. He hurried to Morrison's side. It's that fella. He's surely not a good apple. Morrison chuckled. His intentions are so obvious, but that idiot can't even see it. She even drove me away when I was trying to protect her. Let me tell you, if I show any form of care about her in the future, you're allowed to call me whatever the heck you like. Damon nodded. Jax's and Jax's it is. Sounds good to me. Morrison was rendered speechless. He picked up his phone at that moment and saw that there was a missed call on the screen from Leah. Leah rented an apartment with a duplex floor. The apartment was fully furnished, except for some bedding and daily necessities, which she had to buy herself. She walked to the balcony. There were some flowers, mint, and other plants, and its environment was fairly clean. At this time, she received a call from Morrison. She picked it up and answered it. I thought you weren't going to pick up my calls ever again. Cut the crap. Just tell me whatever the heck you have to say. The voice coming from the other end of the call sounded slightly awkward as Morrison had indeed told her that he would never care about her anymore. Leah walked into the living room. I've found a new place to live. Also, I didn't think you were nosy last night. I know that you worry about me. I just don't want to trouble you all the time. The other party remained silent for a while and suddenly said, Aren't you a huge enough trouble yourself? Why would I care about such puny trouble? Where have you moved to? Leah gave him her new address and asked him to buy her toiletries before he stopped by. Morrison was at a loss for words when he heard the request. Not long after, Morrison arrived at her doorstep with all the daily necessities she had asked him to buy. Leah opened the door and saw quite a few bags in his hands, which seemed to come from the same supermarket. She quickly grabbed them from him. "Thank you, come in." Chapter 2719. Morrison frowned. "How can you be so carefree with me?" Leah carried the things into the living room and looked back at him. "I'm not your type, am I?" Morrison was rendered speechless. Leah picked up the shower gel and was stunned. "This is actually orchid-scented. Young girls really love this scent, don't they? Why did you buy this scent?" He walked up to the couch and sat down. "How would I know what scent you're using? I only grabbed whatever they had displayed on the racks. I would rather die than tell her that I asked the cashier to introduce me to the type of toiletries that ladies would prefer." Seeing that not only the toothbrush and mouthwash cup looked feminine but also the towel, Leah wanted to chuckle suddenly. "Forget it." He went all the way to the supermarket to grab me these. "What would you like to drink?" Morrison straightened his posture. "Whatever you have in the fridge." Leah went through her refrigerator. It was fortunate that she still had 2 cans of coffee. She handed him one of the cans. Morrison took it from her but still felt a little awkward and inconvenient for him to stay here, as they were not a couple. Seeing that he was sitting on the couch extremely unnaturally, Leah took the opportunity to sit down beside him. "Why are you nervous?" He almost choked on the coffee. I'm not nervous." Leah laughed out loud instantly. "Are you still afraid that I'll plot against you?" "Bullshit. Who told you that I'm afraid? Besides, would I be the one who suffers if you were to make a move against me?" Morrison glanced at her but then immediately shifted his gaze away. This woman really doesn't show any vigilance at all. She leaned back on the couch, holding the coffee can tightly in her hand. "Someone used the card key to open my door last night." Morrison immediately looked at her. She continued, "I had latched the door with the deadbolt, so he could not come in. And when I asked the front desk for the surveillance footage, they claimed that they didn't have the authority to pull the footage. But they later said that one of their employees had unlocked the wrong room. In my opinion, an employee can't make such a stupid mistake, but he did admit that he had made the mistake." After saying that, Leah met Morrison's gaze. "The key is that the hotel belongs to Mr. Clark. As soon as something went wrong, he fired the staff without even asking for an explanation." Morrison drank his coffee and looked away. "I should praise you for being smart. At least you know that you should latch the door. Why didn't you open the door this time around when you heard the commotion?" Leah choked on her words and then leaned backward. "I thought you were the one who was knocking on the door last night. Besides, who else would knock on my door apart from you?" Morrison was startled. She thought it was me. That's why she opened the door. After a long pause, Morrison lowered his gaze and said, "You really don't worry that I'll make a move on you, do you?" Leah turned and stared at him. "I know you best in Stoslow, and you're the only person I can trust here." Seeing that Morrison's ears were a little flushed, Leah approached him. "Why are you?" Morrison got up immediately. "I'm going back already. No matter what, don't open your door so casually for others." He then left in a hurry. Leah could not help but burst into laughter when she saw him leaving as if he was running for his life. This fella is rather innocent, isn't he? At the same time, in Yaramore, the 3 young princes were about to be introduced to Yaramore at their baptism banquet. The banquet was held in the palace, and a lot of important people from the political circle and the cabinet were invited to the banquet. Naturally, the members of the Hathaways would also be there. Zyla brought her daughter to pay Daisy and her 3 babies a visit to the palace. Seeing that Daisy had become more charming after giving birth, she could not help but tease her before even entering the room. "The little princess of the Goldmans has grown up now. We can't call you the little princess already, so should we call you the queen of the Goldmans now?" Daisy was sitting next to the stroller teasing the 3 babies. Hearing Zyla's voice, she raised her head and chuckled. "I don't want to be the queen." Xena walked up to the stroller, looked at the 3 babies lying inside, and blinked. Little brothers. Chapter 2720. Zyla stroked her hair. "Yes, they will be your little nephews from now on." Xena tilted her head. "What is a nephew? Can I eat a nephew?" Zyla laughed out loud. "Why would you want to eat everything that's placed in front of you? You can't, your nephews." Looking at the innocent girl, Daisy said enviously, if only I could have a daughter too. Zyla smiled and continued, a son can be very adorable too. From now on, they'll be your little knights, protecting you from all harm. Having a husband and 3 sons protecting me is actually my dream. At this time, Yorick and Nales entered the room from the back garden. Seeing her father, Xena giggled. Daddy, I'm playing with my brothers. Yorick stopped next to her and stroked her head with his palm. Oh really, do you like to play with them? She nodded. Yes. Zyla rubbed her cheek. Then you should come over often to play with them in the future. Xena tilted her head. Can I do that? Of course. Your cousin likes you very much too, doesn't she? Daisy chuckled at that moment. The banquet was about to begin. Nales pushed the stroller into the banquet hall while Daisy walked in beside him, wrapping her arms around his. Xena also entered the hall holding the hands of her parents. Diana and Rick were chatting with their guests. Seeing her son, daughter-in-law, and grandsons entering the hall, Diana immediately put down her wine glass and walked toward them. My precious are all here. The 3 babies in the stroller stared at everyone in the banquet hall. Tick and Tack were not afraid of strangers, but Toe cried as soon as he was picked up, showing his fragility and weakness instantly. Diana and Rick were both amused, and Toe's crying attracted everyone's attention immediately. Daisy was helpless. This little boy is such a crybaby. Nales took Toe from his parents' arms, and the tiny fella lay in his arms with a flushed nose and teary eyes from all the crying. When taking pictures, Tick and Tack looked straight at the camera as if they were curious about the block and did not appear frightened by the environment and people around them. As for Toe, he kept clinging onto Nales, refusing to face the camera. Daisy chuckled, lifted the bear hoodie, and covered Toe's head. Baby, you must learn from your brothers and be as brave as them. Toe seemed very reluctant. He continued to bury his face in Nales's shoulder to hide from the camera. Coupled with the ears on the hoodie, which were both pricked up at the moment, the little fella looked extremely cute. It made everyone behind them laugh. After taking pictures, it was time for the babies to go through a Xylocavian traditional ritual lot drawing that would predict their future undertaking. A toy crown, a scepter, a diamond, banknotes, and bank cards were placed in front of the babies, and the rest of the items included a trophy, a football, a racing car model, and a model of a villa. The 3 babies started to crawl toward the toys. Tick then grabbed the crown and the scepter and fiddled with them. Diana laughed out loud. It seems that Tick has chosen the throne. Tack sat in place, sucked his finger, and stared at the items for a long time. However, the diamond's glimmering reflection suddenly seemed very attractive to him, so he reached out, grabbed the diamond, and then stopped. When it was Toe's turn, he hurriedly grabbed everything left on the ground, apart from the crown, scepter, and diamond. Daisy was shocked by Toe. This little fella wants it all. Nales could not help but laugh and hug Daisy. It seems our youngest will definitely be a genius in the future. Daisy leaned against his shoulder and smiled. Have you figured out the babies' names? Nales nodded. The eldest is Theodore, the second is Langford, and the youngest, Xerxes. Daisy was startled for a split second and then laughed out loud. Theodore, Langford, and Xerxes, you're really good at coming up with names, huh?